Chapter 5. Who is the dark haired one? Do you really think anyone will come? Ellen asked nervously, turning to Anne Marie in the bedroom. Your father doesn't think so. Of course not. They're always threatening stuff. They just like to scare people. Anne Marie took her nightgown from the hook in the closet. Anyway, if they did, it would give me a chance to practice acting. I'd just pretend to be Lisa. I wish I were taller, though. Ellen stood on her tiptoes, trying to make herself tall. She laughed at herself, and her voice was more relaxed. You were great as the Dark Queen in the school play last year, Anne Marie told her. You should be an actress when you grow up. My father wants me to be a teacher. He wants everyone to be a teacher, like him. But maybe I could convince him that I should go into acting school. Ellen stood on her tiptoes again and made an imperious gesture with her arm. I am the Dark Queen, she said, intoned dramatically. I have come to command the night. You should try saying, I'm Lisa Johansson, Amory said, grinning. If you told the Nazis you were the Dark Queen, they'd haul you off to a mental institution. Ellen dropped her actress pose and sat down, with her legs curled under her on the bed. They don't they won't really come here, do you think? She asked again. Emery shook her head. Not in a million years. She picked up her hairbrush. The girls found themselves whispering as they got ready for bed. There was no need, really, to whisper. They were, after all, supposed to be normal sisters, and Papa had said they could giggle and talk. The bedroom door was closed. But the nights did seem somehow different from a normal night, and so they whispered. How did your sister die, Anne Marie? Ellen asked suddenly. I remember when it happened, and I remember the funeral. It was the only time I'd ever been to a Lutheran church, but I never knew just what happened. I don't know exactly, Amory confessed. She and Peter were out somewhere together, and then they were in as a telephone call that there had been an accident. Mama and Papa rushed to the hospital. Remember? Your mother came and stayed with me and Christy. Christy was already asleep. She slept right through everything. She was so little then. But I stayed up. I was with your mother in the living room when my parents came home in the middle of the night, and they told me Lisa had died. I remember it was raining, Ellen said sadly. It was still raining the next morning when Mamma told me. Mamma was crying, and the rain made it seem as if the whole world was crying. Amory finished brushing her long hair, handed the hairbrush to her best friend. Ellen undid her braids, lifted her dark hair away from her thin gold chain she wore around her neck, the chain that held the Star of David, and she began to brush the thick curls. I think it was partly because of the rain. They said she was hit by a car. I suppose the streets were slippery, and it was getting dark, and maybe the driver just couldn't see, Amory went on, remembering Papa was so angry. He made one hand into a fist, and he just kept pounding it into the other hand. I remember the noise of it slam, slam, slam. Together they got into the wide bed and pulled up the covers. Amory blew out the candle and drew the curtains aside so that the open window near the bed let some air in. See that blue trunk in the corner? She said, pointing through the darkness. Lots of Lisa's things are in there. Even her wedding dress. Mama and Papa have never looked at those things. Not since the day they packed them away. Ellen sighed. She would have looked so beautiful in her wedding dress. She had such a pretty smile. I used to pretend that she was my sister, too. She would have liked that, Amory told her. She loved you. That was the worst thing in the world, Ellen whispered, to be dead so young. I wouldn't want the Germans to take my family away, to make us live someplace else. But still, it wouldn't be bad as being dead. Amory leaned over and hugged her. They won't take you away, she said. You're not your parents either. Papa promised that they were safe, and he always keeps his promises. And you're quite safe here with us. For a while they continued to murmur in the dark, and the murmurs were interrupted by yawns. Then Ellen's voice stopped. She turned over, and in a minute her breathing was quiet and slow. Amory stared at the window, where the sky was outlined and the tree branches moved slightly in the breeze. Everything seemed very familiar, very comforting. Dangers were no more than odd imaginings in the ghost stories and children's make-up to frighten one another. Things couldn't possibly happen. Amory felt completely safe in her own home with her parents, in the next room and her best friend asleep next to her. She yawned contentedly and closed her eyes. It was hours later, but still dark, when she was awakened abruptly by the pounding on the apartment door. Amory eased the bedroom door open quietly, only a crack and peek out. Behind her, Ellen was sitting up, her eyes wide. She could see Mama and Papa in the night clothes, moving about. Mama held a lighted candle, but as Amory watched, she went to a lamp and switched it on. It was so long. It was a long time since they had dared to use strictly rationed electricity after dark that the light in the room seemed startling to Amory. Watching through the slightly open bedroom door, she saw her mother look automatically to the blackout curtains, making certain they were tightly drawn. Papa opened the front door to the soldiers. "This is the Johansson. Is this the Johansson apartment?" a deep voice asked, questioning loudly in a terrible accent of Danish. "Our name is on the door, and I see you have a flashlight," Papa answered. "What do you want? Is something wrong?" "I understand you are friends, your neighbors, the Rosens, Mrs. Johansson," the soldier said angrily. "Well, yes, Sophie Rosen is my friend, that is true," Mamma said quietly. "Please, could you speak more softly? My children are asleep." "Then you'll be so kind to tell me where the Rosens are." He made no effort to lower his voice. "Well, I assume they're home sleeping. It is 4 in the morning, after all," Mamma said. Amory heard the soldier stalk across the living room towards the kitchen from her hiding place in the room towards the kitchen. From her hiding place in the narrow sliver of the open doorway, she could see the heavy uniformed man had a holstered pistol on his waist, and in the entrance of to the kitchen, peering around into the sink. Another German voice said, "The Rosens' apartment is empty, and we were wondering if they might be visiting their good friends, the Johansons." "Well," said Papa, moving slightly, so that he was standing in front of Amory's door, and she could see nothing except dark blur of his back. "As you see, you are mistaken. There is no one here but my family." "You'll not object if we look around?" The voice was harsh. It was not a question. "Well, it seems we have no choice," Papa replied. "Please don't wake my children," Mamma requested again. "There's no need to frighten the little ones." The heavy booted feet moved across the floor again and into the bedroom. The closet door opened and closed with a bang. Amory eased the bedroom door closed silently. She stumbled through the darkness to the bed. "Ellen," she whispered, "take off your necklace." Ellen's hand flew to her neck, desperately began to unhook the tiny clasp. Outside the bedroom door, the harsh voices and heavy footsteps continued. "I can't get it open," Ellen said frantically. "I never take this off. I can't even remember how to open it." Emery heard the voice just outside the door. "What is here?" "Shh," her mother replied. "My daughter's bedroom. They are sound asleep." "Hold still," Emery commanded. "This might hurt." She grabbed the little gold chain. She yanked it with all her strength and broke it. As the door opened and light flooded into the bedroom, she crumpled it into her hand and closed her fingers tightly. Terrified, both girls looked up at those Nazi officers who entered the room. One of the men aimed the flashlight around the room. They went from closet to closet to look inside. They swept their gloves hand and he pushed to the floor several cloaks and bathrobes that hung from the pegs on the wall. There was nothing else in the room except a chest of drawers, the blue decorated trunk in the corner, and a heap of Christie's dolls piled in a small rocking chair. The flashlight beam touched everything. He turned angrily to the officer and turned towards the bed. "Get up!" he ordered. "Come out here!" Trembling, the two little girls rose from the bed and followed him, brushing past the two remaining officers in the doorway to the living room. Amory looked around. These three uniformed men were different from the ones on the street corners. The street soldiers were often young, sometimes ill at ease, and Amory remembered how the giraffe had for one moment let his harsh pose slip, and he smiled at Christie. But these men were older, and their faces were set with anger. Her parents were standing beside each other, their faces tense, but Christie was nowhere in sight. Thank goodness that Christie slept through almost everything. If they had wakened her, she would be wailing, or worse, she'd be angry, and her fists would fly. "Your names?" the officer barked. "Amory Johansson, and this is my sister." "Quiet! Let her speak for herself. Your name?" He was glaring at Ellen. Ellen swallowed. "Lisa," she said. and cleared her voice. Lisa Johansson. The officer stared at them grimly. Now, Mamma said in a strong voice, you have seen that we are not hiding anything. May my children go back to bed. The officer ignored her and suddenly grabbed a handful of Ellen's hair. Ellen winced. He laughed scornfully. You have a blonde child sleeping in the one room, and you have this blonde daughter. He gestured towards Anne Marie with his head. Where did you get the dark-haired one? He twisted a lock of Ellen's hair. From a different father? From the milkman? Papa stepped forward. Don't you speak to my wife in such a way. Let go of my daughter, or I'll report you for such treatment. Or maybe you got her from someplace else, like the officer said with a sneer. From the Rosens? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Anne Marie, watching in panic, saw her father move swiftly to the small bookcase and take out a book. He saw that he was holding the family photograph album. Quickly, he searched through the pages, found what he was looking for, tore out 3 pictures, 3 separate pages, and handed them to the German officer, who released Ellen's hair. You will see each of my daughters. Each one has their name written on the photograph, Papa said. Emery knew instantly which photographs he had chosen. The album had many snapshots, all of them poorly focused pictures of school events and birthday parties, but it contained a portrait, taken by a photographer, of each girl, a tiny infant. Mamma had written in her delicate handwriting the name of each baby daughter across the bottom of the photographs. She realized, too, with an icy feeling why Papa had torn them from the book. At the bottom of each page of the photograph was written the date. The real Lisa Johansson had been born 21 years earlier. Kristen Elizabeth, the officer read, looking at Christie's baby picture. He let the photograph fall to the floor. Anne Marie, he read next and glanced at her, and stopped at the second photograph. Lisa Marguerite, he read finally, and he stared at Ellen for a long time. Unwavering moment. In her mind, Amory pictured the photograph that he held, the wide-eyed baby propped up against a pillow, her tiny hand holding a silver teething ring, and her bare feet visible, and the hem of her embroidered dress, and the wispy curls dark. The officer tore the photograph in half, dropped the pieces on the floor. Then he turned the heels of his shiny boots and grinded them into the pictures and left the apartment. Without a word, the other 2 officers followed. Papa stepped forward, closed the door behind them. Amory relaxed her clenched fingers of the right hand, which still clutched Ellen's necklace. She looked down and saw that she had imprinted the Star of David on her palm.